Hello, and welcome to another episode of Biblio Files. This is the program on AADL TV, where we take a few minutes each time to discuss one book topic. My name is Lucy, and I'm here as usual with Amanda and Christopher. And today we have a special guest, Tyler, which we're very excited about. And our topic today is a book by a Latine author. So, Amanda, what did you pick?
For this week's pick, I chose a book that I read last summer. The book is called I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter by Erica L. Sanchez. The book, I believe it was 2017. It was a finalist for the National Book Award for Young People's Literature. It's a teen fiction book. I really enjoyed this book. This book is about a daughter who is not so perfect. I want to read you a little synopsis that kind of puts it into the set. Perfect Mexican daughters do not go away to college, and they do not move out of their parents' house after high school graduation. Perfect Mexican daughters never abandon their family. But Julia is not your perfect Mexican daughter. That was Olga's role. And Olga was her older sister who dies in a tragic accident, and high schooler Julia is left to pick up the pieces. And she is struggling big time dealing with her own grief, but then she's being constantly criticized by her mother for not being as perfect as Olga was. So Julia has a lot to deal with in high school. She is not getting along with her mother. There's that constant battle going on. She's also trying to find her own voice, learning that it's okay to be different than her family, than her mother, than these cultural expectations that are placed upon her when she wants to be her own person, doing her own thing in a different way than what's expected of her. It's also a teen book, so it's a book of firsts. Julia has her first love, her first kiss. She's learning so much about herself and her family. But the main thing is following Julia as she's discovering things about herself. There's also a mystery element, though. Julia discovers something in Olga's room that is quite out of character for Olga. And so she begins to wonder, is Olga really as perfect as everybody thought she was? So she tries to put these pieces together and do a little research and dig up information on Olga's other private life that maybe she was keeping from her family. Maybe she wasn't as perfect after all. So there's a lot going on. It's a coming of age story. I love Julia's voice. I love the story. It's a winner. I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter by Erica L. Sanchez. Christopher, what did you pick?
Well, I picked this book called Hurricane Season by Fernanda Melchor. And she's a Mexican writer. This book just came out, I think, 1 or 2 years ago. I haven't read a book like this in quite a while. It begins with a murder and then tells a story from 4 main characters, different perspectives. The style of writing is very interesting. Each chapter is really one long paragraph. So I keep wanting to say it's stream of consciousness, but that's really a poor description of how this book is written. The book is full of cruelty, abuse, a lot of sexual violence. So it can be very difficult to read, but I think it really provokes the reader into a response of horrible conditions, horrible squalor and family situations. So it's a very powerful book. I really enjoyed the style of storytelling. I didn't think that I would. Sometimes stories that just have long pages and page long sentences turn me off, but I really enjoyed this one. I don't want to say too much about the plot because I'm afraid of cheapening it and reducing it to something that it's better than. I could call it a Rashomon-like story, which I just did, but that would really reduce it to something that it's not. It's much more complicated than that. So that's all I really want to say about this book. Hurricane Season by Fernanda Melchor. Tyler, what did you pick?
Well, thanks for having me on, first of all. And I was really excited to choose this book by Valeria Luiselli called The Story of My Teeth, or La Historia de Mis Dientes. It was written in 2013 and then translated by Christina McSweeney into English in 2015. And it is a really interesting book. It's adult fiction, and it follows the life of a character in Mexico City. His name is Gustavo Sanchez. He goes by Highway to his friends. And he, ever since he was a kid, he's a big collector of things. So he collects straws when he's working at like a food stand as a child. And then he grows up and gets a job at a juice factory called the Jumex Juice Factory outside Mexico City in like a suburb, and starts collecting like certifications there. So he learns how to do all these things, one of which is auctioneering. And he becomes like a semi-famous auctioneer, travels around the world, learning all these different methods. And his big like idea is that he sells like the stories behind the items, not the items themselves, which is like an interesting like commentary on art. I think he is like a very classic, like unreliable narrator. He's always, bringing, I mean, as a good auctioneer should be kind of. So he's bringing in all these, literary, like famous literary people and artists. And I'm like constantly Googling things as I'm reading to be like, is this a real person? Did he just make them up? But the teeth part of it come in because he, one of his like famous lots that he auctions off are like famous people's teeth. He's telling the stories behind them, but it's a very interesting story. The main reason I brought this book for this though is the story behind the writing of it. It was originally commissioned as a part of an art exhibit for a gallery that is attached to the real like Jumex juice like manufacturing plant in Mexico City. There's a real like, it's like the biggest juice manufacturer in Mexico, and they have their own art gallery that they commissioned, and they have a lot of big pieces there. And they wanted this Valeria Luiselli to write a story for them. And the way she wanted to do it was she wrote a chapter of this and then she sent it to the factory, and they had someone read at the factory, like on the floor to the factory workers in the style of like a tobacco reader, I think they were called, like the old cigar factories in the 1800s. They would read stories to the line workers. So they would read the chapter and they would discuss what they thought about it, and they would record themselves discussing that. And they sent the recording back to the author, and she would listen to it and then incorporate what they said about her chapter into her next chapter of the book. So it was like a really interesting collaborative method, I think. A few of the factory workers like even came to the opening of the exhibit and met her. And it was like a really interesting thing where like that almost becomes the story to me. I don't know. It was really, labyrinthine and cool. I definitely recommend it. Story of My Teeth by Valeria Luiselli. And Lucy, I'm really interested to know what you chose for this one.
Well, I will tell you in a minute, but before I do, I read another, that book sounds so interesting, Tyler, and I read another book by that author, The Children's Archive, which is so vastly different from what you just described, and it was very good. I loved it, but it's just so interesting to hear about an author who is writing such different things. So anyway, the book I chose is called Gabby, A Girl in Pieces, and it is by Isabel Quintero, and it is also a teen book like Amanda's. And in some ways, Amanda reminds me of the book that you chose. It is about a girl named Gabby who is in her senior year of high school, and she's chronicling this year through her diaries, which is what this book is. And this can take different forms. Sometimes it's poetry, there's a zine in there. But Gabby is a self-identified, light-skinned, fat Mexican who loves hot wings, tacos, and poetry. That's what she says. And the poetry is something that really helps her process what's going on around her, because she lives with her mother, her father and her brother. Her father is sometimes there, but her father is addicted to meth. And so he comes and goes, and sometimes she'll see him as the homeless person, across the street. And that is a very complicated aspect of her life, obviously, because she loves her father, but she doesn't love this piece of him. And then she has two best friends, Sebastian and Cindy. Sebastian is gay, and that's not necessarily always accepted by their culture and community and by the school. And Cindy reveals at the beginning of senior year that she is pregnant and she's going to keep the baby. So those are the friends that Gabby is centered between. And so the book covers a lot. It covers sexuality, it covers body image, it covers addiction, covers teen pregnancy, it covers colorism, because Gabby's trying to always have to convince people that she's Mexican because she doesn't appear to be Mexican. The way it reminds me of the book you talked about, Amanda, is that Gabby's torn between the world her mother is telling her she has to exist in to be a good girl. Like, you can't go away to college, you can never leave. Those are not good things that good girls do. You can't go out with boys, but then this total double standard for Gabby's brother, who's allowed to do whatever he wants. And then Gabby's torn between the world and the culture that's being presented to her. What she sees in her mom's behavior, her mother actually gets pregnant in this book as well. And then also what she sees the other kids in her high school doing. And so it's this constant going back and forth about how to assimilate yourself into those two cultures and how to find yourself. But because it's her diary, it's obviously told in her voice, and she's very funny. Some of her poetry is like extremely moving. Some of it's hilarious. I loved the way that it had a lot of different pieces where she was expressing herself through poetry or through drawings. So it was a lot of fun to read. And it was written in 2014, but I think that it still feels really relevant today. So that is Gabby, A Girl in Pieces by Isabel Quintero. And does anyone else have anything they want to add about these authors or books, or other authors or books?
Did we all end up choosing Mexican authors? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we did. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Interesting.
Yeah, we did.
To choose from, and I had a hard time choosing which one to talk about today. And I saw this on my shelf and I said, yes, I haven't talked to anybody about that book. But Lucy, the book you mentioned, somebody at the library recently just checked that out because they just heard about it. Somebody I work with read it over the summer. So it's around still, even though it's 2014. I didn't realize it was that old, actually.
Yeah, and I really loved it. I read it right before this, but it's been on my list to read. And so I'm glad I did. I was having trouble centering on a pick, so I was like, I'll just choose something new, which doesn't make sense, but I did it. Anyway, so that is our episode on books by a Latine author. Tyler, thank you for joining us. And as always, we love to hear from you about what you're reading. So if you have a favorite book or have recently read a great book by a Latine author, we would love for you to tell us about that. You can comment on the link below. So thank you for joining us for another episode of Biblio Files.